Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. A big shout out to Furby House Books in Port Hope. It's because of our partnership with Furby House that the Coburg Public Library is able to bring authors to the screen. So we are very grateful for their partnership. We are so pleased today to have Rachel McMillan with us. Rachel is the author of the Herringford and Watts mysteries, the Buren and DeLuca mysteries, the Three-Quarter Time series, the London Restoration, and her latest release, the Mozart Code. Her nonfiction works include Dream Plan Go, a travel guide for independent adventure, and a very merry holiday movie guide. Ashley Pimenter is our host once again today, and we're thrilled to have her back. When she's not curled up with a good book, Ashley creates and supports programming to support the kids who are a part of Girl Guides of Canada. She's also the co-chair of the Red Maple Awards Steering Committee and writes reviews for the Canadian Children's Book News. So welcome, Rachel and Ashley. We are so pleased to have you here with us today.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Oh, I'm so excited we're here to talk about the Mozart Code, which we have featured right here. Yay, it's going to be fantastic. As you can see, I've tried to cheat my copy because it's a little loved. I've been traveling with it because I just don't want to put it down. So let's jump right into this fabulous book. How did this story find you?
It's kind of twofold. A long time ago, I did read a rumor that Mozart's death mask showed up in Vienna in a pawn shop in 1947. And I kind of filed that away in my brain's filing cabinet because I thought that was such an amazing thing. And I was like, I need to use that in a book someday. But it really started when I was writing the London Restoration. I needed to create a character who could be Diana foil, later Somerville's connection to MI6, because I knew I was going to go the Bletchley Park route and have her work for MI6 with the churches in blitzed London. And so I created Simon Barre, and he showed up and I was like, oh, he's going to be a good contact. And there's this scene in the London Restoration where he and Diana have tea at the Savoy Hotel, and he sits down, and the moment he sat down, he told me his entire backstory, his link to communism, the fact that he was from a wealthy family, everything about him. And I was like, oh my gosh. I remember texting my editor and I said, Simon needs a book. And so Simon got a book, and it was amazing because then I had to create a woman who would be worthy of him. And I really got to know him writing the London Restoration. But readers of the Mozart Code don't have to read either or. It's just, you get to see Simon from a totally different perspective because it's from his friend Diana's. So that's kind of how this book came about. That, and I have a lifelong passion for Vienna. I've always wanted to write it historically. I've written it in some contemporary books. And so that really infused all of this.
That is so exciting. So as I had not read the London Restoration, and I was actually going to ask you if we would see these characters in other iterations, because you're known for your mystery series and writing these epic not adventure, that's a bad word for it, these epic character development pieces. And I was also desperate to get to know Sophie even more and be like, oh, am I going to get to know her as we go on? And I love how Simon just presented himself to you, and it makes a lot of sense actually, because when you read this, Simon is a very fully formed human from the very first moment you met him. I feel like I know him immediately. So that makes so much sense, because Sophie's more of a mystery as you unravel it. And where did so you were talking about how Simon sat down at this table with Diana, who also shows up in this one. For those who did the London Restoration, she's back in this, and she's just so good. So good. Everyone needs a friend like Diana. It's just what I was thinking. Where did you draw the inspiration for Simon and Sophie? What informed their voices and their characterization?
Well, I'm pretty lucky that in every book I get the characters first, and often they do sit down in my head and I just have them and I can see them and hear them. And that's kind of been something that has been throughout the trajectory of my writing career is that often I'm just taking to their dictation. With Simon, I really wanted to turn some of the archetypes that we see in fiction, especially romantic fiction, on its ear, in that I really wanted to kind of gender swap the emotional arc and journey to the male point of view, because we don't always get that. Simon is still very much the hero of the story. He can save Sophie. He is very adept at his job, but we also get to see the inner turmoil of someone who's just desperate to be loved and to belong. And so I really wanted to play with that concept. I also wanted to create a character who's kind of the antithesis to a lot of the Cold War heroes we see in spy stories by John le Carré or in the movie The Third Man. I really wanted to kind of turn all of this on its ear. And subsequently, that means that Sophie has to kind of attain some of the more difficult barriers and challenges that it takes to get to know her. Whereas really that would, in a lot of romantic type stories, not be the case. So I wanted to do that. But I also wanted to create a hero who kind of reflected a lot of the insecurities that transport us to any type of human experience that was challenged by great adversary. And that is something that, you know, most of this was written during the 2020 lockdown. And so it really, that cloistered sense of you have a lot of time by yourself, your negative voices are really loud, that informed a lot of how Simon ended up being in his final formed iterations. So I hope that answers that. I'm a little bit rambly.
Totally fine, because I was just along for that ride. And it's so fascinating because as a reader, when I saw the cover art, actually, which is like almost like Harlequin in feel, I love
It's
it.
so
I
beautiful.
love,
Yeah.
I love like a good pearl clutch. I almost wore mine. I was like, I should wear them.
Oh,
like,
yay.
and I was like, oh, but I would not stop fidgeting. I'm as bad as but just not stop touching them. That's for sure. So it's interesting because at first you're led to believe that Sophie is the whole piece of it. And as you're like introduced to Simon, he just is so lovable. And you're right, you really do turn stereotypes on their heads with this. And I really appreciated that as a reader. I also appreciated that you said it after World War II. So it was this other piece of the narrative that we're not always given. Like usually, like a novel will often end in 1939.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas yours did not. And I left annotations for myself of like one where we were jumping between the past and the present, because you did this really beautifully. And I actually want to come back to your lockdown piece in a moment. But as I'm also rambling on, one of the things that I think will really intrigue readers with your book is that you have so many layers and so much nuance in this, like, I love an uneven timeline. I love when it jumps back and forth and you're like, oh, I'm in the past. And again, leaving myself annotations so I remember where to find them after. How, as an author and as like a human being who is creating this, as much as they are created in your mind by your imagination as well, how do you manage all of those layers that you weave together and all of those different story arcs? Like how, like, I am sure that there are readers who are like, how did you do this in your mind?
It's really difficult. And sometimes I wish that my brain would just stop at one level, but it's my brain's propensity to learn an interesting facet that, oh my gosh, Mozart's sister Nannerl was one of the first female chess players in Europe. How can I not use that, given that Simon Barre, and this stems back to the London Restoration, his role at Bletchley Park is based on a real life guy named Hugh Alexander, who was chosen as a code breaker at Bletchley with Alan Turing because he was a chess master. So I always wanted that chess aspect. But then I learned this interesting thing about Mozart's sister, and I'm like, there has to be a chess and Mozart piece. And then it just kind of unravels from there. A lot of it is, I think, the fact that I'm a bit of a piece of Velcro, and I am a voracious reader and always have been. I'm obsessed with music and musical history. And somehow all of those things kind of sew up together, and I just find an outlet for them. So It does take a lot of work with my editors, both my main editor and my line editors, to make sure that it's all cohesive. I do find that a lot of readers get a little bit turned off because I do not take the time to explain everything. But as a kid, when I read a book that was a little bit over my head in terms of history or a language, I loved, and we didn't have the internet as readily as we do now. I loved having to go and read more about something, because that always kind of opened portals. And so I think when I sew in the layers, I'm subconsciously hoping that someone will pick up on a thread that they want to tug at in their own time. And so I give you just enough, hopefully, that you become interested. But it's a lot of my brain refusing to shut off. And it's a lot of my deciding that characters should have a language in which they view the world. So you'll see Simon's language is through chess, and I always use chess to have him kind of visualize what he's doing, whereas Sophie's is through Mozart and music. And the longer they spend together, the more that those two viewpoints intersect so that they're together. So it's just seeing what I can play with, and it's really fascinating. And for someone who knows nothing about chess, that was really challenging, because they have to actually play a chess game that could be feasible in the real world. But lots of notebooks and lots of daydreaming and lots of walking around Toronto trying to work it out in my mind.
Well, and sometimes it really humanizes authors when we take that moment to be like, how did you get there? Because I've worked with, we were introduced, I have a lot of experience working with children's lit as opposed to adult lit. And one of the things we try to teach kids is that, like, sometimes you get stuck on an idea and kids will stop at that stuck point and be like, I don't know where this idea is going to go. It's just stuck. And a lot of adults who want to break into this and have a story to tell also hit that sticky point of like, but my brain is like, I don't know how to unweave this. And I love that you shared some of your strategies of like going for a walk and dumping ideas in notebooks and just seeing where things take you.
And sometimes it doesn't work, but there's no such thing as a wasted word or a wasted bit of history, even if it was cut out in edits. So I just keep a folder where I transpose words from one document to another. But I would say to anyone, whether wanting to break into the children's sphere or my day job is as a literary agent, so I love this part of the industry, or in adult fiction, your entire world is trying to find a way to make something marketable. The zeitgeist of the industry is World War II, while still finding a way to put your passion in. So it's a lot of start and stops. It's definitely not done without the help of my editors, who would spend hours at night on a Saturday working through this made-up chess game with me. But I think that authors can infuse their passions and do something that you really want to learn a lot about, because you will be spending absolute years with it, right? So yeah.
Oh, I love that. I love that thought. And it's so funny because, like, as I was reading it, I can play chess, but I'm not good at chess. I'm the player. Like, I used to make this joke that in the 8th grade, I joined the chess club and I was like, I'm going to be great at chess. And I could not figure out how strategy worked. And I was like, well, and I was the kid that they practiced against because there was no rhyme or reason how I played. And so
I love that. You can't anticipate your opponent's move.
Yeah, there was no anticipation because Ashley had no foreseeable logic. And one of the things, and it's like, it's funny. And you know what? It made my buddy Simon a significantly better chess player. So I will take credit for that. Who's also Simon. That's fabulous. I didn't even put the connection together until that moment. But it's so fascinating because when you're reading this book, I read this book almost like a chess player because I'm not a musician. So I couldn't like put myself in Sophie's place. But I was reading it as a chess player, and I was reading it as being like, oh, what's the next move? And I'm like, and I knew you had somewhere. And I knew it was like the author's taking me somewhere. I can't wait to see where the author's taking me. And you just had so many places. There were a number of them where I was like, oh, this is not where I thought we were going to go. Just like a real game of chess against my buddy Simon.
And it was neat because that whole first chapter, if readers stick through it, if they're like, why is it so much about, well, Simon's setting up his chessboard. Every player in the entire novel is either thought of in his subconscious or mentioned in dialogue in that first chapter. So even though my editor was like, you got to drop us in the action, we were like, but we also have to have Simon set up his view of the world. But chess is also a really romantic game. I mean, you know, she beats him at chess, and that's when their attraction kind of develops. And he always remembers that a queen on either side of the board can go anywhere. I loved that Sophie could play both sides. The chess imagery was fun and difficult, but fun.
I can only imagine. And now, if there are chess aficionados out there, we ask you to be gentle with us.
Yes,
because don't add us.
I also, you will find mistakes. I just did my best. You can't get a PhD in everything.
Well, and that's kind of the fun of historical fiction, is that it gives you this world to play in. And the Covert Public Library has done this whole series where we have chatted with a bunch of different authors who have purposely written historical fiction versus nonfiction, because it gives you that chance to really infuse the story in here. And I highly recommend to readers out there who are interested in historical fiction, but looking for something a little bit different. This is definitely it. And you're right. The first chapter throws you in, and I had a moment of like, oh, what have I got myself into?
Yeah.
But like this morning, I was like on the last chapter, one chapter to read before I had to talk to you. And I was like, I am finishing this if I'm going to walk down the street while I'm doing this, because I was so invested and so just ready to see where this was going to go. So like, I recommend just get over the first chapter. It's totally worth it. Like it sets the stage perfectly for who Simon is and who Sophie is and who you're about to encounter in this world. Like your world building, it's fascinating because these are built worlds, but they feel almost painted on. So it's interesting. Like now I'm throwing another layer into this of like art in its many forms. And it's so wonderful. Now I've gone off into another tangent again, which seems appropriate for this one. So one of the things, actually, I was reading your acknowledgements, and you wrote that this was the first book you'd written during lockdown. What was that like for you as an author? Because I think we're going to be encountering this more and more of both the author who could not write during the pandemic, and the authors who had to learn a different way of writing. What was it like for you? What was your experience during lockdown as an author?
It was terrible. And I will say that straight out. I mean, my friend Kate Quinn, her most recent book is dedicated to The Diamond Eye, is dedicated to authors who had to write during lockdown. You find two different authors. One is what I was initially, the optimistic person is like, oh my gosh, I have all this time to finish this manuscript. I am just going to buzz through it. But what I soon realized is that I work horribly at home. I need to be able to pick up and go to my favorite place in Toronto to write at Yonge and St. Clair. I need to have just enough din around me that I don't get so lost in my own insecure voices. And writing through something during a time when I live alone. I wasn't allowed to see anybody. We were supposed to be a one-person household. I basically went 4 months of my life with only like seeing the Loblaws cashiers. And that, even for an introvert like I am, that's really taxing, because you feel you have no connection with the world. You have no idea what's going on. And that time in our world was very scary. We know so much more now than we did before. We know that we are surviving this. So subsequently, the book kept getting really, really dark, to the point where an early draft, this book took longer to get on the shelves than anticipated, because it needed far more rewrites than any of my other books. And that's partially because I kept implanting the darkness and the insecurity around our world into their worlds. And yes, it's post-war Europe on the brink of the Cold Wars and communism taking over Prague. So it's a dark, shadowed time to begin with. But there should always be that romantic hope that is at the core of Simon and Sophie's story. So the challenge was there was just too much darkness. And so I had to keep rewriting just to get it a little bit lighter. But I found it very difficult. And many of the authors that I've talked to have found it the same. Some for the reason that their husband and kids were home where they weren't before. So suddenly they were teachers as well as babysitters, as well as all of these things while trying to write. And I just think that everybody went through something, and there's that universal empathy we have with each other, especially in the writing community. But there's also hopefully a grace that readers give to authors who finished books during that dark time that might be a little bit different than they're used to in our oeuvre, because no matter how challenged you were, we were too. We were just forced to be creative at the same time.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. That was really meaningful. And I think it's important that we all remember that, like, this is a celebration that you did something light in a really dark period. That's a really, like, just want to highlight that. And the authors who did that, who brought us light during the darkness, thank you. Because I went through a weird period during lockdown where I was reading books where only terrible things happened to people, things that were significantly worse than the lockdown. And I was like, yeah, you know what? I'm not being chased by a dinosaur.
I like that, because I know so many people like myself who just couldn't read anything if it wasn't light and romantic. I needed happy. I kept going back to favorite books, but I like that you took it the opposite way. I'm going to read about something so terrible that it makes our world like even better. I love that approach.
Yeah. Although if you do want, like, readers out there, this is not Jurassic Park. This is not, like, don't do that to yourself. Like, this is the perfect little escape afterwards to remember that despite whatever hard or scary time you're about to go through, there is always space for love and chess and music. And I just love that you managed to get that through. Thank you for putting all the rewrites in. It was definitely worth it for me as a writer and me as a reader, and for all our other readers. And hopefully the advice that you've given to our budding writing community as well is also landing, and also, like, helping them to feel a little bit, to come at themselves with a little bit more ease and gentleness. Because you're right, like, it's hard to not be able to just go and write or talk to your people. Like, I think about an interview we did earlier where someone talked about the importance of their writing circle and coming together and sharing, and how difficult it is to come together and share when you have this virtual divide.
Yeah.
And so it's just, this is a wonderful thing to come for all of us. And so thank you for putting in the time and the energy when none of us had time or energy.
And he's done. I used to think Simon, there's a scene where he and his contact Novak are on the Charles Bridge in Prague, and they kind of hearken to that scene in the cover because there's the Charles Bridge there. And I could not get Simon and Novak off of that bridge for the longest time. I would just stop there. And I remember thinking, this book will never, ever finish. It'll just be stuck there forever. But yeah, I really encourage writers to just give themselves some grace. It's not an easy time period to live in, and to be expected to create things that should have some sense of lasting testament to the world, but also to uplift people, takes a little bit of yourself that is hard enough in normal times, let alone when the world is on the brink of something scary like murder hornets. So yeah.
Well, there's an idea for your next one.
Yes.
So just, like, speaking of next projects, do you have an idea that's percolating? Will we get to see these characters again?
Diana and Brent from London Restoration, Sophie and that quartet, I kind of left them at the place I want them to be. But I do have 2 books coming out in 2023. The first is called The Castle Keepers. It's a collaborative novel with Amy Runyon and Janelle Suzelski, and it's set at a Yorkshire castle across 3 wars. So the Boer War, World War I, and then my portion is post-World War II, when the castle has been turned into a home for shell-shocked soldiers. So there's a romantic thread that comes out in March with HarperCollins. And then I'm just about to turn in my September 2023 book, and it is a retelling of the Scarlet Pimpernel in Vichy, France. So it's called Operation Scarlet, and it's romantic, and there's swashbuckling adventure, and it really takes the classic tropes that we love from those old stories and infuses them into a World War II novel that's going to be a little bit less dour or tragic than many of the world. I'm not taking away from the seriousness of the war, just finding an angle that allows us to experience it in a slightly lighter, more romantic pace. So that's, and then beyond that, I'm still kind of figuring out where I want to travel next, because I always look at each book as a major trip, right? Because I have to spend so much time in a new place. So
well, that is so exciting.
Yeah.
Hot tip, friends in the reading community. We've got some more awesomeness to look forward to. Rachel, thank you so much for having this conversation with me today. I
It's
really
delightful.
appreciated your honesty and your compassion for our audience and for the characters in this book. And I highly recommend, I'm going to hold it up so everyone can see it. Okay, ignore my dog-earedness because I just love it. So this copy, this book, fabulous. Sophie, her pearls, you're going to love it.
Thank you so much. Your questions were amazing. Thanks for putting up with my rambles. Thank you. I mean, the one saving grace during lockdown was the Libby app from the public library, but also the day the libraries opened where you could go for pickup, it just changed my entire world. Back when we were still like spraying down everything, I'd be like, I'm going to make the books scented. So at least when they go back, they're sanitized, but smell like lavender. So thank you, libraries and Furby House.
Yes, thank you for that plug. We were thrilled to be able to be open to the public and offer some service. Absolutely. And I think, as you mentioned, it's a haven for a lot of people. So at least they were able to get their materials and we were able to keep our doors open. And we were very fortunate in that sense. So thank you both once again for a really interesting conversation. I know our audience will thoroughly enjoy it. So thank you, and thank you to everyone for listening in today. The Mozart Code is available for loan at the Coburg Public Library, and copies are also available for purchase at Furby House Books in Port Hope. So take care, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us, and hope to see you next time.
Thanks so much. Thanks for the wonderful questions. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
That was so good.